Joe Askren here with drjoebrews.com. This next brewery neural download was done here at Calusa Brewing in Sarasota, Florida. This is their production space on Derrick Avenue. Head brewer Mike Pulowski is going to raise our IQ in a common test done during brewing, the VDK test. Now let's go see Mike.
So Mike, thanks so much for spending time with us, man. I really appreciate you today. I know you got a lot going on, a lot of busy things happening today. So much obliged, man. Thanks for just helping us spread knowledge and educate our students, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. This is something I kind of fell into myself and fell in love with. So people get to see the cool stuff we're doing here and they appreciate craft beer. Maybe I'll inspire some other people to kind of take the same path. So today we're going to crash one of our hazy IPAs. It's Citronius. I'm going to show you kind of the process that we go through to make sure there's no off flavors. We run a VDK test, and essentially what that is we're pulling a sample of our beer. We're heating it up to 180 degrees. We use a sous vide for that, actually. And then we will cool down the sample with a control sample, and we'll do a sensory test and smell the beer. And as long as it passes, then we'll give it a cold crash. And I'll kind of walk you through the process of how we do that. So we kind of do things a little bit differently. We're known for our hazy IPAs, all of our hop forward stuff. So I'll show how we give it a good rouse from the bottom, and we'll pull a sample, make sure it looks like a kale smoothie, because then we know that we've imparted all that flavor off of those hops, and we'll be ready to roll.
VDK, for those of us who may not have heard of that before, what does that stand for? What does it mean?
Vicinal Diketones, and those are kind of these compounds in the beer that can kind of, during fermentation, impart these kind of off notes that we don't like. So we'll heat up the sample to kind of fast track and bring out all the aromatics in it, and they kind of create this like butterscotchy, kind of popcorn butter smell and aroma. And really the only kind of like buttery beer we want is over Universal and Hogwarts. We don't want that in our beer here now. So
exactly. Do you do this with every beer, Mike?
We do this with every single beer. Wow. We add something called ALDC when we're knocking the beer out, and that typically prevents that from kind of occurring, but we still always kind of have to make sure, we are a production facility that's always trying to kind of keep up with the demand of the product. So we don't want to put anything out there that we're not happy with. So we do everything we need to make sure that that doesn't occur.
Have you guys always done VDK tests since?
We have. We've done a couple different ways. To really kind of like hone in on the process. We actually bought a sous vide because we're consistent at 180 degrees. We don't have the water cooling down or anything like that. We know that this is going to be our best chance at catching any sort of off flavor. So we run those. We'll actually do a soft crash. And when we soft crash the beer, what we're doing essentially is dropping the beer from its de-rested temperature, which is 70 degrees, down to 58 degrees. This serves a couple purposes, kind of drops a lot of particulates out that we don't want in the beer, and we're able to harvest the yeast off of that so we can repitch it for further brews. We'll do a VDK then. If it doesn't pass, then we'll go ahead and give it a couple more days until it cleans up. And then we run a VDK before the official cold crash of the beer before we're ready to transfer it. That way we've done 2 times over, made sure that there's no flavors we want or we don't want in that beer, and we're happy with it. So
the VDK test is just a way of like seeing if the beer has properly matured or fermented and ready to go into the next step. Okay.
Exactly.
And if it fails, there's hopes that it'll clean up.
If it fails, typically we see that the beer is still a little bit in the active fermentation process and it's got a couple more points to drop. We've always had them clear up over a day or 2 after that, so that's why we always make sure. Another thing that can actually occur is after the dry hop. We typically dry hop post-fermentation. Sometimes when you dry hop the beer, that can kind of like reinvigorate the yeast and it can pick up a little bit more. So that's why we make sure to do another one, just to make sure we don't have any hop creep or anything like that, and the beer truly is at its terminal gravity.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we switched over to this process just because, with those West Coast IPA beers, you get a lot of hop creep in those. A USO 5, some breweries have said that it goes up to 10 days that they'll find hop creep occurring. So
wow.
We always want to make sure that we're not sending something out and 3 or 4 days later saying like, oh no, there's actually something wrong with it. So
absolutely.
This to us is just giving us the most consistent process, or the consistent results throughout our entire brewing process. So we've stuck with this way, it's tried and true.
So it sounds like if, it's an investment in every beer that goes out. So if you don't do it, you're really gambling. Like the home brewer, we're not going to do that probably, and we're just, if it tastes bad, it's no big deal. We're just making it. But for you guys, it's such a big expense, you want to get it right before it's packaged.
Absolutely, you know, and even other than the expense, you know, we all here take a lot of pride in our beer. You know, we always just like to go through all the tanks and taste them along the whole process. That's because we're looking to see if anything seems wrong or anything seems a little off, or if we need to make some fine tweaks to them. So, you know, we just have a lot of pride in what we do here. And
Sure do.
the feedback has always been so great. Sarasota has been so overwhelming in their support for us. So, you know, it's the least we can do to make sure that they're getting the best beer humanly possible.
I love it, man. I love it. Consistency, just like in cooking and restaurants, you know, that's why people love your beer so much. That's why you're getting all these medals and just crushing it. It's fantastic. Yeah, we got there, Domino,
Hey
huh?
there, Domino. This is our brewery cat, Domino, who
the
just
brewing kitty.
he misses all the customers,
Yeah.
but we give him so much attention here now. It's like
bet.
we're his little family now.
That's
so
it.
I'll go ahead and pour off a decent bit into here, and then we will just seal it up right away.
So this is beer in a fermenter. What beer is this?
This is Citronius. This is
Citronius.
our exclusively dry hop with Citra hazy IPA.
Right.
You know, this is one of the beers that kind of like, before I worked here, this is one of my favorite beers to come to. You know, I remember having a friend taste this beer the first time and saying, "What kind of beer is this? I hate IPAs." And I'm like, "Dude, this is the Citra IPA." He's like, he thought it was just like ripe peach and mango, and it's just like it's a great beer for people who don't like IPAs to kind of get into trying them because it's not overly bitter. You know, we don't add any 60-minute additions or any like boiling additions to this. It's just we had the hops in the whirlpool. It's kind of like a low bitterness, but like high on the tropical fruit and the hops. So it's just,
Absolutely.
this is definitely one of our favorites.
Oh
but
yeah, this is definitely one of your favorites.
I've got my sample, you know, it looks nice and hazy here. And we've got it all sealed up, and now we're gonna go ahead and stick it in a 180-degree bath.
Okay, and how many weeks old is this right here?
This beer was brewed on Tuesday last week, so we're at, what, 8 days now.
Okay.
And typically we find that with a healthy yeast pitch and the proper pitching rate, we're typically done fermenting at about day 4 or 5, sometimes day 6, but we're actually pretty quick in our process here. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and toss this in my bath here.
So that's an immersion circulator.
Yeah, yes, it's at
I'm
180
familiar with that.
degrees. And then I will just throw on some gloves because no one likes to get burnt here.
Beautiful. So this is just like in cooking, guys. You ever doing like sous vide cooking?
And then we'll
It's
just
got it
kind
pegged at
of
180 degrees, you said.
give it a little tighten down, and then we just set our 30-minute timer. I remember back in the day when we were doing VDKs at the other brewery I worked at, using a LaCroix can that had the top ripped off, and we were just kind of like letting it sit for 15 minutes and then like smelling it as it cooled, you know, with no control. And
Oh wow.
this is definitely the most honed in process I've ever, you know, seen. And I think a lot of people are surprised when they see the sous vide because they've never seen it applied in this kind of way, but
Yeah.
it's been really nice for
Absolutely.
us. So.
I mean, the money you're spending on a piece of equipment like that it's pennies on the
It's
dollar
marginal
compared
when
to
when
marginal.
you're
Yeah.
throwing in a dry hop that's, you know, something like $400 worth of hops. You know, you definitely
Right.
spending 40, 50 bucks on a sous vide. You know, it's no big deal at all here. So,
On that Centronius, how many barrels do you make at a time? You do two.
so when we do Citronius, we knock out 16 barrels at a time.
Okay.
The beer gets 22 pounds of Citra in the whirlpool, and then we give it an addition of another 44 pounds in the dry hop. So you're looking at 66 pounds total of, you know, hand-selected Citra hops.
Just to kind of sum up VDK, you're looking for all flavors, like you said, the butter. Are you looking for like DMS too? And
Yeah,
everything?
you know, really, all of us here kind of know what a clean beer smells like, and we're looking really for any sort of off note. And there's even times where we may smell and say, you know, we don't smell diacetyl, but something doesn't smell quite right. Like, let's give it another day and just test it again, because we know if this is still in the beer, maybe it was just a weird sample, or maybe there's nothing wrong with it. But every time we've gone the next day, it's been cleaned up and all that. So it's just like we all kind of, this is where you kind of rely on your senses. You know, it's it takes some people a little while, and some people have a threshold in how much they can smell diacetyl. I myself have noticed I can smell it really well. You know, even if there's just a little bit in the beer, I can typically pick up on it really fast. think everyone here is actually fairly sensitive to it. Another thing we'll look for is like in our lagers before we soft crash them, if there's any sort of like sulfur or anything like that, we'll typically give them a couple more days, let them kind of clean up a little bit more, because nobody really wants a sulfur bomb with their lager, you know. So that's one thing we pride ourselves on too, are clean, crisp lagers here. So we always make sure to just, you know, ultimately just give you the best product we can.
And that sulfur is kind of telling you that it's a little green still?
Yeah, you know, the sulfur just, the yeast hasn't cleaned up all the way, you know, and typically here, you know, we like to go low and slow with our lagers. We brew them pretty far in advance just so they have the time to just really have a slow fermentation process. Really gives a nice clean yeast profile to it. And, you know, there's no reason not to just give it its time and do it the right way. You know, so.
It's amazing what happens if you just let the yeast do its job.
Yeah,
right?
and really we've noticed, like, you know, after 4 or 5 days, they've always kind of cleaned up, and they typically have a couple more days left until we want to give it that soft crash anyway. So, I mean, even with some of these beers, when we're pitching bricks of yeast, we'll give it, you know, almost 2 weeks until we're going to go ahead and soft crash it, just because we really want to make sure it has this full time to just do its thing.
Right on.
One thing we do also before we actually go with the whole full-on crash of the beer is we'll check the gravity of the beer and the pH. That essentially is kind of like us looking at the numbers and seeing, like, this beer is no longer fermenting, the pH is going up, so that means that the yeast is no longer, you know, fermenting and everything. And we've already done that today. So the first thing we do in the day is we just kind of go into our book, go through all of our different beers, and just record all of the gravities. You know, one thing we notice is when we've dry hopped a beer, the gravity is a little bit higher because there's so much particulate with that kind of dry hop charge in it. But yeah, we just go through all these, check our pH, and just kind of really cover all of our bases before we're ready to say a beer is done.
That's great. That's great.
We kind of prefer dry hopping the beer at 58 degrees just because we really like the flavor profile lends off, you know. Yeah. But when we want to go ahead and do the full cold crash, we're going to set it down to 32 degrees. That way, any unwanted particulates fall out of the beer. You can transfer it without having sludge of like yeast and hop sludge going through. And that way, when you open up your can, you don't have sediment at the bottom or anything like that. You can go ahead and drink the whole 16 ounces of it. Oh, it really does make a huge difference, especially with like all these hazy IPAs. You know, you have anywhere between 44 to 66 pounds of dry hop sitting in that beer. That could, you know, potentially 3 or 4 barrels in the bright tank could be kind of unusable because there's so much particulate in it. You know, you don't want to drink all those hops and all that green stuff. It's just going to come off as really bitter and like grimy, and it's also going to upset your stomach a little bit there.
Exactly.
So we want to make sure you enjoy your whole time drinking that beer.
Yep.
So my timer is up to 30 minutes and our hot bath is over. So I will pull this sample out, throw it on the table. Before I plunge it into the cold bath, I typically go get my cold sample. That way it has a second to cool off before I throw in the 35-degree water. This is just good for us to do so we have kind of a reminder of like what the beer smells like now. Now we'll smell doing the side by side kind of can help bring out any sort of off note that we find in the beer.
Gotcha.
So. Now I will give my sample a couple splashes before I throw it in there to not shock it and have it blow up on me.
Sounds like that might have happened once or twice.
Oh, we've gone through a couple of cases of mason jar glasses. In the 5 years or so I've been here, we've definitely seen it happen before. So this is kind of my way of always ensuring that I don't have to restart the whole process
right,
over.
that's true.
Trying to keep the day rolling, you know.
That's it.
All right, so it feels nice and cold to me. We're gonna go ahead and send it in here. And success, glass is safe. We throw our control sample in there. And now typically we'll wait about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll kind of come over. We don't want the glass to be completely 30 something degrees. That way we don't mute any of this, any of the aroma, but we just want to get to a cooler temp now. So
Gotcha.
like we have our English mild, our Murloc in the tank, and that's giving off some really great, like kind of like lighter espresso notes, some dark chocolate. And as it warms up, it just kind of seems to get more intense, which that's what I want out of that beer. So.
Yeah, that's a sign of a good beer, and all the beer out of here, of course, and some good craft beer. As it warms up, it tastes fantastic, takes on new flavors, and some of the inferior beer, it's exposed at a warmer temperature.
I was gonna say the warmer temperature, a lot of these, if any beer has like an off note or astringency or anything like that, like it starts to become really noticeable once you get the beer warmer.
Right on.
You know, with our lagers, we like to drink them a little bit colder just because it's like nice, cold and snappy, light. That's kind of what you drink those for on these hot Florida days. But I'm a huge IPA fan. My favorite beer is like, you know, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I just go back to that. That's my tried and true. So I love all the stuff we do here in terms of the hoppy and all the other styles, but I'm definitely a big fan of the hazies. Like that's what I'm going to go to when I'm in the tap room or anything like that. We have a contract with Yakima, and we've been lucky enough to, we were a part of their forward program last year, so we had to try some really interesting hops out. HBC 1019, which is probably the brewery's favorite hop right now on the production side. You know, we get lots of coconut cream, lemon, lime, guava. It's a phenomenal hop. We also got to try the HBC 990, which was featured in our Bones and Domino. And it's definitely more of a, it's very similar to Mosaic, I would say. It doesn't have like the berry thing. It's just very like earthy, but still it didn't come off as like, you know, too earthy or resinous. It kind of just, it was a good balance between a dry hop charge. So
that 1019 is what's in the forward, right?
1019 was in our forward.
Yeah, it's really good.
The beer that we have coming out this week, or you know, this beer that we have coming out soon is our Cold Pale Ale. That's a 1019, also exclusive. That beer is kind of like a true expression of just what that hop is. On the nose, you get like a bright lemon lime. Like you almost, it really seems like there's fruit actually in the beer. When tasting it, you get some really bright tropical fruits like guava, but then you get this really interesting like coconut cream character that's just, we're beyond happy. You know, it's in a nice and nice, snappy, drier beer, so it definitely kind of pops a lot more. Really excited about that, and we just kind of look forward to keep kind of incorporating that in our other dry hops to kind of just bring some more complexity to these beers. And you know, we always want to try some new stuff. You know, we got Tampa Bay Beer Week coming up pretty soon. We're going to do some beers with some newer hops, like we got some Rawaka, which is a New Zealand hop. That one, you know, from what everybody has said, I've tried from some other breweries. It's like grapefruit, you get some cherry, you get some pineapple. You get some earthy tones to it too, and it's really nice. So we just look forward to kind of offering vast array of different like hop profiles with our hazies and everything like that. So you know, we want customers to be able to come in and try a couple different ones and really be able to say like, oh, so I know I don't like Mosaic, but I love Citra, or oh, I really like this Rawaka or this Matueka beer, and then they can kind of go out into the market and find other beers that they really like and be able to pinpoint their style a little bit more too, which is kind of nice.
Right.
All right, so I will always start with the control sample. I get my glove on because it's sometimes harder to pop these off. Give it a little bit of a rousing there. You know, and all I can smell here now is just like really tropical fruit. It's just the hops.
So that first one was the control?
That's the control right there. Now we'll do our heated sample.
Okay.
A little CO2, and typically there's a lot of CO2 buildup, so it takes a second to really get a good smell. So smell it, give it a good rouse around again. And beer is clean. That means we're good to go ahead. And
so they kind of smell similar?
You know, typically with our heated samples, there will be a little bit of a different smell. Heating the yeast up like that can kind of give it, I would almost call it like a brothy smell, just a little bit. But one thing we're looking for are like any kind of like out of the normal like sweetness. So if we smell that, typically, even if it doesn't come off as butterscotchy or buttery, we will go ahead and just hold off, because, you know, better safe than sorry. Pushing things back one day is a lot better than dumping the 16 barrels of beer, you know, or selling beer that just doesn't smell right or taste right to the folks. So yeah, it's definitely like, it definitely is way different for sure in the smell.
But it smells
you know,
clean.
Yeah, it smells clean, you know, and it's definitely like the first couple of times I did this, it kind of took me a little while to get used to what the heated sample actually smells like. because it doesn't smell like, you know, your normal just control there. There's definitely like a weird aspect of that heated yeast and everything. But, you know, one thing we noticed was like stuff like beers that have honey malt, that throws off a really strange sweetness. So we started toying around with recipes to kind of prevent that from like affecting our ability to tell whether or not beers are clean or not. So typically when we do this test, I'll bring everybody in here and we'll all smell it, because you never know who's got a stuffy nose that day, or, you know, some people can perceive diacetyl better than others. So I like to get everybody kind of involved in the mix. That way, you know, having 3 people say the beer is good opposed to 1 is just a better, you know, better procedure.
So are there like a top 3 or top 4 or 5? Obviously you said diacetyl. You said sulfur before.
Sulfur, like DMS.
DMS, like corn.
The corn, yeah, like candy corn. You know, one thing too is like the potential of any sort of wild bacteria getting in the beer, which that is kind of we've never experienced that. That's kind of like a doomsday for a lot of breweries. You know, if you start to smell any sort of bread, like an isovaleric infection or anything,
like a funky wild.
You get like a funky wild thing, then you know that you've kind of got bigger problems at hand.
That's not
just
a
dumping a
thing.
beer. You know, at that point, you're kind of looking at, you need to kind of pinpoint how that happened and just pull all the soft parts off of the tank and just clean it like crazy and test it out. You know, but no, we take our process of cleaning everything super serious. Everything gets sterile. You know, we clean tanks right away. We've even have our yeast tested to make sure there's no wild bacteria in it in the past. Like, we've never had any issues here. You know, when we do sour stuff, we essentially cover every tank and, you know, close every tank up. We hot kill everything like crazy. We caustic acid and PAA clean everything. So we really go through the entire process we need to. We have a whole set of other parts, kegs, hoses, everything sour in a different spot, just because we don't want to get anything mixed up, and we don't ever cross over with things because we want to have no risk of contamination like that. So
yeah, that's smart. So this is, to me, it's kind of like a little stressful when you're just about to test it, because God forbid it smells like like a funky wild flavor. That's not a good day.
Well, you know, especially like when you first start doing this, you know, sometimes we have these crashes happening on Saturdays or Sundays when there's only one person working, and you're kind of looking at the pressure of like, if you miss an off note and we cold crash the beer, at that point we're done in the process. That off flavor is still going to be there. So
right.
I think a lot of people will initially feel a little hesitant to want to do that on their own, or just feel kind of nervous about it. But the more you do this, the more your confidence kind of builds up, because once you actually do smell that diacetyl, you know what you're looking for. One thing we do is we can actually do diacetyl tests where we can just dose a beer and all kind of like, we can do different rates of it. So we all kind of sit around in a round circle and we'll do like a blind smell test. And that just kind of acclimates any sort of like, anybody who's never smelled it before, they'll know what we're talking about. And for me, like, if there is diacetyl in the beer, it jumps out like crazy, you know?
Yeah.
I kind of am one of those people where if I go and I try a beer that I think has diacetyl, like, I kind of can't drink it anymore, you know? I kind of makes me feel kind of sick, you know? So it's just like, to me, my brain is just kind of trained to the point now where I'm like, it jumps out, you know, across the room at me. So, and I think a lot of these guys are the same way. So,
yeah.
Always like to give it one last taste,
Exactly.
or one last smell, you know. But what we'll do now is we'll just grab our CO2. We will purge the bottom of the tank out, or purge the connection, and then we will go ahead and rouse the tank up. So let's take a look here. And now we just have like a dedicated CO2 line that can kind of float around the brewery.
Okay.
Pop this off and take it over to the front aisle here.
So this is the fermenter that we took the samples from?
This is the fermenter we took our sample some. This is
the Citronius.
This has got our Citronius in it. Just give everything a really big sandy clean. Spray the bottom again really well.
And again, what day is this on the fermentation?
This is day 8 here. So
day 8, okay.
we have typically we'll see will hit terminal gravity. Then we will soft crash, we'll harvest for 2 days. Then we will, after that second day of harvesting, we will go ahead and start recirculating the tank and dry hop it. And then we'll give it a couple days, and then we go ahead and send it all the way down. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just purging out the bottom, making sure there's no oxygen between the connection and the tank.
Okay.
Even just the smallest tiny bit of oxygen could kind of ruin this whole entire beer.
So you're pushing the CO2 through there, but then leaving an opening so it pushes out.
Yeah, so really it's getting you that sanitizer out, and it's just any sort of oxygen that was there when we connected this is just kind of getting purged out. You know, we noticed in like oxidized beer, a lot of time it mutes the hop character. It can make the beer darker in color, and generally the beer shelf life is significantly less, you know.
Right.
I've opened up some of our IPA cans that are 4 or 5 months old, and still they taste wonderful. A beer with a high oxygen amount is going to really age fast. You know, in about 2 months in, you could have a really old malty IPA that just kind of tastes stale, and that's the last thing we want here. So I'm a little crazy too. I give it a lot of time just because I really want to make sure.
I was going to say, that's a lot of time.
Then I slowly just kind of tighten it down.
Because that ball valve's, obviously that's closed. So you were just...
Oh yeah, this valve here is closed. So all I was doing was purging that out this whole time.
Of just that little space there.
Yeah, now what we'll do is I'll make sure it's nice and tight.
Yeah.
I will give the tank a couple big bursts.
Okay.
And when you do that, you can feel this kind of vibrate a little bit. You're agitating the hops and pushing them back into solution. Close it, let it build up a little more.
Again, what's the objective here?
So right now we're just trying to push all those hops back into solution.
Okay.
Kind of our last effort to impart any of that flavor and aromatic off into the beer. What I'll do now is I'll let this run. I'm going to go grab the glass, and we're going to pull a sample and make sure that we see a lot of hops in solution. That way we know we rouse the beer.
So that's pushing CO2 through the bottom up to the entire tank here.
Yeah.
Okay.
The way we kind of describe it here is it's almost like a kale smoothie when we do it the right way, because it's got a lot of green and suspension. Depending on the dry hop charge, sometimes you won't see as much get up in the solution, but you can always tell based off of the smell and the flavor.
Yeah, the color is beautiful on this.
I was going to say,
in the tap room.
We'll clear one off here. We got a little bit going. We'll see. We'll let it rouse up a little bit more. I usually clear some off because things can settle in the Zwickle there.
So by doing that, this sort of off and on here, it's kind of punching air. It's kind of agitating.
It's agitating because all these hops are kind of settled down.
I see.
Into the cone here, and it's agitating all those back into solution. So
you're trying to really get your money's worth on the hops.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, see, that's a good sign. That means that we're definitely looking pretty green here. You can even see some green particulate in the foam. If you smell it, it definitely has a very strong hop aroma. We're gonna pour one more time though to make sure we have it exactly where we want it.
Is that pressure also because you've been pumping CO2 through there?
Yeah, you know, our tanks are typically around 20 PSI. When we're done, we'll crash it and it'll vent back down, but no, we're looking nice and hazy.
Wow, you said 20 PSI?
Yeah, we're at 20 PSI. We'll crash it down. It'll get down to about 50 PSI, and we'll let it sit. And on today is Wednesday. On Friday, this beer will be in the bright tank. So we're looking pretty good here. Definitely is a strong citra hop smell. You know, a little peachiness to it. If you put a light up to it, you'll kind of get to see it. Kind of has a green look to it. It's definitely a little bit light, but you can see kind of hops around the foam. We got some hops in solution there, so we're going to be happy with this right here. We usually give it 1 or 2 more for good measure.
That's an interesting technique. Is this always done after the VDK?
Yeah, so pretty much after we dry hop a beer, we'll have a day for it to sit, and that day we'll rouse it up. and then we'll rouse it the day of the VDK. Really what we're trying to do is we're just, like you kind of said, we're trying to get, you know, the most use out of these hops. The last thing we want to do is put 66 pounds in the beer and then have it taste a little maltier, you know, so.
Is there a name for that technique that you just did?
We're just rousing.
Rousing,
I
okay.
think a lot of breweries do this.
That's interesting.
I think some breweries will, instead of doing a recirc, they'll actually just rouse the tank after adding hops. We found that recirculating the entire tank, you know, you have the motor shredding those hops up, and it gets into solution a lot better, and it's just a lot better flavor and aromatic.
And Mike, you already said, but just for refresher, that recirculation step, when do you do that? When is that?
So we'll do that after we're done harvesting, after the soft crash.
Okay.
So we'll typically harvest a couple drinks, and then we'll go ahead, once all the yeast is off the bottom, then we'll go ahead and dry hop it.
Okay. Hey, so I got this guy, man, Mike, phenomenal brewer. You're doing some awesome things here at Calusa Brewing, award-winning brewery. I just got to hang out with this guy for like almost an hour. He was giving me all these great techniques and tips. I hope you enjoyed them, and can't wait to get back here later whenever you let me in again.
Oh, absolutely.
Anytime,
you know, anytime.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
For anybody who sees this video, if you see me in the tap room, you're coming down to check it out.
Beautiful.
Feel free to come up and ask questions. I love to talk about beer.
Awesome.
So.
And you got your gold medal winning Zote being made here in the back.
We do. Right now we've got a 15 barrel batch of the gold medal winning Zote. You know, we do 30 barrel batches for distro. We do 15 barrel batches for the tap room. So just got that rolling now. Looks like Zeke is done lautering and he's boiling. So he's got about another 3 hours left in his day or so, and he's going to be done and out of here. So
that's it, man. Give him a go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike. Thanks
no
again,
problem.
buddy.
Absolutely.